Hey, Josh.
Hey, Taylor, can you hear me? The work that we are doing. So to recap, we've already had seminars on why we tell stories. We also had a seminar on having a seat at the table, how important it is, and how it's the leader's responsibility to create space for everyone's story whenever you are in whenever you're in a leadership position. Also, we had a third seminar on how to take care of yourself as a leader, that leadership self-care, which was incredibly timely at the end of the fall semester with all of the stress of the finals and everything else, but also with the stress of a global pandemic. So in that way, those are some of the seminars that we've already covered, the topics. Today, we're going to be looking at how do you motivate people using story. So learning to motivate ourselves and others is a leadership skill. And the good news is that we use that word skill very intentionally here. It is something that you can learn. So if we're going through this, if you feel like I am not good at this at all, please don't tell yourself that you can't be good at it. This is a skill that is learned. So this is just a way for you to develop or to grow as a leader. So to get us started, there is a research problem. This experiment started in the 1940s. And so I want to go ahead and show you this. And then I would love for someone to unmute, especially if you haven't seen this before, okay? So see if you can solve that problem. We need that candle to be stuck on the wall, mounted on the wall, and you have those supplies right there in front of you. So anybody have any ideas for how we can mount that candle to the wall with those supplies? Again, feel free to unmute and give us some of your suggestions.
You could heat the candle with the matches, and then the wax should be able to adhere itself to the wall.
I believe that's Jacob talking. Hey, Jacob, it's good to hear your voice again. Okay, so one idea is to heat the candle. So use that match to light the candle, heat it, and then attach it that way. Is that correct, Jacob?
That is correct.
Okay. Anybody else have another idea?
On the matches, like the little paper part of it, maybe you could like heat the candle, stick it to that, and then tack that to the wall.
Okay, heat the candle, kind of adhere that candle to that paper part of the matchbook, and then tack that to the wall. Very interesting there. Great idea. Jacob and Brianna, great ideas. Any other thoughts?
You could attach the little box with the pins and then put the candle either on top or make a hole or something like that.
Very interesting. Is it Balaam?
Yes, Belém.
Balaam. Thank you very much. Great idea. Okay, so that was one of the experiments here. So again, in 1940s, Carl Dunker starts this experiment. And the first thing is he puts different groups in the room, says, see if you can figure this out. And he times them. Times them for when they can come up with their answer, how successful it is. Then he gives them this. It's slightly different. And he times them doing the same work. So can anybody unmute and tell me what is different from the first experiment to the second experiment?
The taxes are out of the box.
The tacks are out of the box. So this is where you'll have to be virtually honest with yourselves. You could raise your hands, I guess, virtually if you would like to. But how many of you thought, other than Balaam, who said this, how many of you thought about using the box as a separate tool or resource whenever you had this picture, that first picture? For those of you who did see the box as a separate resource, you are definitely in the minority. The research shows that most people didn't consider the box to be a resource until it was separated from the text. Now, Balaam, I believe what you were describing is something like this. Is that correct?
Yes, and I wasn't sure at the beginning, but I read and it says box as a tool. So I was like, okay.
Yeah, no, exactly right. It's in the instructions. So when the researcher Dunker was doing this experiment, he saw that it took groups far longer whenever they had this setup than when they had this setup. And the term that he came up with in the research is called functional fixedness. So what this means is that the function of the box, I'm pointing at my screen like you can see that, sorry. But the function of the box is, and Taylor, I'm just now realizing something. I'm not sure that we started the record, so I'm going to make sure of that real fast. I apologize, everybody. Is it recording right now, Taylor?
Yeah, I have that it's recording.
Oh, wonderful. You're great, Taylor. Thank you so much. Okay, so the function of the box in this screen that you're seeing, for most of us, myself included, the first time I saw this, I assumed, or I had a fixed mindset that the box's function was to hold the text. And then in this setup, I realized that the box did not have a fixed function of holding the text, but rather I could use that box creatively to help us reach one of the possible solutions. It seems as if this is this solution right here is the one that Dunker was after. So that's functional fixedness. Then a new researcher came in the 1960s in Glucksberg. He was also a sociologist, and he was doing research on how long it took these groups to solve the task. Now, his research was a little bit different. His is on motivation, which is really where our the intersection with today's seminar. So his research was on motivation. So he had two different research groups, and they're doing these exact same experiments. But for one research set of groups, I guess, for this one set, he said that there's an incentive. I will offer, we're going to pay the group that gets this done the fastest. And so for one set of research groups, there was no monetary incentive at all between the two different experiments. And for the other one, there was a monetary incentive. And so these two groups had the incentive, they're timing them to see which group goes faster. The normal assumption here is that the group that's getting paid is going to go faster. Is that correct? Let's see if you nod, so we'll go with that. Here's what happened. The group with the monetary incentive solved the problem faster. They did, and that was what we expected. However, that was only in the task where the box and the tax were separate. So in this task right here, if we offer a monetary incentive versus a control group with no monetary incentive, the group with the reward was faster. The really fascinating thing, though, happened with this group. Whenever we were looking at the control group with no monetary incentive versus the groups that had the monetary incentive, the control group went faster here. So the money actually slowed people down from reaching the conclusion on this group. Here's what the researcher concluded. The researcher concluded that the people in the reward group had their creative abilities blocked or hindered by the incentive, by the reward. That by trying to do something as fast as they could, by having that incentive program, that it created a system in which they weren't able to be as creative. So here is what I guess one of our big questions today. How do we normally motivate people? So let's go ahead and we'll open this up again. You can put your thoughts in the chat. You could also just unmute and tell us. But what do you think? How do we usually motivate either ourselves or other people?
I'd say like kind of how they did in the experiment, like with a reward, like most commonly probably like money. Like I feel like that's why we go to school, is to get a job so we get paid well. So like
Isn't that interesting, Brooke? That we even do this for you to like come to college. So we're trying to motivate you to come to college. And so what's our incentive? If you come to college, you get a better paying job, you'll have more money. Okay. Somebody else, what's another motivation or tactic, I guess, for motivating people? Taylor, are there some in the chat that you can read out? I'm not sure if that's true or not.
Yes, Chance said recognition.
Recognition, good. How are we trying to motivate you to come to these seminars? By giving you a chance to be recognized, right? There's a medal, there's opportunity to take a picture with the president, like that type of thing, right? Okay.
Arna said opportunity for growth is a motivator. Kimberly Burns said try to appeal to what they would get out of participating.
Okay.
People are saying to be successful, self-achievement.
Yeah, I think this is very true. Those are all great, great answers. So I think that when we're looking, especially at life after college, to motivate other people, often businesses, organizations, institutions, they do try and motivate through money, like whether there's a quota for the sales that you have to reach, whether it's a certain bonus if you hit certain numbers or you have so many clients reached. There's usually some type of like financial incentive. Okay. I think there are also incentives for, well, there's lots of rewards that we try and give. I would say not just necessarily money. There's rewards for recognition. What about like how you personally motivate yourself? What do you use to motivate yourself to get up early and go to a yoga class? Or to, what do you use to motivate yourself to get your homework done in a timely manner?
People are saying to create more jobs for people, the benefits I will get at the end, affirmations, goals, to have free time later in the day.
Yeah, that's good. We usually motivate ourselves and others through a system of rewards and punishments. So there's a book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. And in that book, it talks about motivation. I'm sorry, I'm quoting the wrong book. There's a book called Drive by Simon Sinek. That's the one that I was talking about. So in Drive, it talks about these like carrots and sticks, right? What motivates us? And so a reward or a punishment. And I think this is usually how we operate. We operate on a system of rewards and punishments, incentives and punishments. And so I think with this candle experiment, it tells us that sometimes incentives and punishments, rewards and punishments work. And in other times, whenever the task is more cognitively complex, it seems as if rewards and punishments might not be the best motivating tool. I think I see a hand up virtually. Please feel free and jump in. I think it's Ahmed or Ahmad. If you could jump in, if in fact your hand is up. If not, I apologize for calling you out. Okay, we'll keep going. Feel free though to unmute and jump in if you do have a question. So incentives and punishments. I think it's really calls a good question here. So what really motivates us? Sometimes, yeah, incentives, rewards and punishments, that can work. And other times, maybe we need to look at something else. I believe that stories have the power to motivate us intrinsically. That if we want to look at for a different motivator, I believe that stories can have a great, or it can be a great tool for doing that, both for ourselves personally and when we're looking at motivating other people. So, autonomy. This is one of the things that motivates us. Again, we're looking at Drive as one of these texts that kind of formed the data for today. So autonomy is one of those things that I feel like motivates us. So it's the freedom to direct our own lives. I think whenever we were talking about how do you motivate yourself to get up early and work out, somebody said, well, because I get free time later in the day. Like that's a perfect example of autonomy. You want to have this freedom, and so that's a motivating factor. So there are businesses that are going to what's called a ROW, which is a results-only work environment. So where they're giving people a lot of freedom about how, like when they work, where they are when they work, and this global pandemic has absolutely increased this. that people are working from a lot of different spaces than what we used to. It just happens to be that I'm in my office giving this talk, but frequently I am working from home. I have two sons who are both school-aged kids. And so frequently I am in calls and also trying to teach math or social studies or things like that to my sons. And this is just a part of the world that we're in now. But it's helped my job satisfaction. It's helped motivate me, the fact that I get some freedom or some autonomy in where I'm working, even in the times in which I'm working. And so that is one of the things that can really motivate us. Now, whenever we're looking at story, I think it's important for us as leaders to recognize what is the story of our leadership. Are we the type of leader where we're giving other people opportunities, we're giving other people freedom and autonomy, freedom to contribute? Or are we the type of leader that when people are working with us, they feel as if they don't have any space? So the stories that we share are things where, again, it's not what you're normally thinking about when we're talking about storytelling, of like you have this one instance and you're recalling a time in your life. Instead, what we're thinking about here with stories, like the way in which that we're operating. So you can tell a story of your business, you can tell a story of your laboratory, you can tell a story of your own like personal leadership abilities, through giving other people opportunities for freedom, for them to explore their own ideas and thoughts. So that is one of those ways in which we can see motivation happening effectively outside of rewards and punishments. So another thing that motivates us, often we're motivated by mastery. And I believe someone even said this in the chat. So one of the things that really motivates us is when we have an opportunity to learn a new skill, to grow. In fact, many of you were motivated to be at this seminar because of that. You're here because you want to learn to be better as a leader. You're trying to learn a new skill. I know that from watching my own kids, but also from remembering in my own childhood, I would stay up so late some nights whenever there was something new that I was learning about, whether it was in a book, whether it was some new skill that I was learning, whether it was something that my dad had taught me and we were out in his shop. Like those types of things can really motivate you. The ability to learn some new craft or skill. So in storytelling, I think it's important here to think about, you tell stories to where there's a fixed mindset. In other words, I was good at math or I was not good at math. Or do you tell stories about yourself of, I knew that I didn't have the skill yet to really succeed in algebra, but through hard work and determination, through my ability to listen to other people and to learn, I was able to really master that skill. See, those type of differences in the way that you reflect on your own story, your own narrative are crucial. Because if you tell a story of a fixed mindset, so something like, well, I just never, or I always show up late. Well, that's a story that you are telling as a leader that's a fixed mindset that says that things can't change. But if you start to tell a story of the ways in which that you grow, the ways in which that maybe you didn't have a skill, but now you're learning that skill, that allows for a growth mindset for everyone who's following you. I think this is also crucial in family dynamics, right? Instead of saying this person always does this, which is a very fixed mindset, talking about ways in which we can grow and become better people, ways in which we can do new things and accomplish new skills. So that type of storytelling, I would really start to examine, are you the type of person who tells a story of hope and optimism, or are you the type of leader who tells a very negative, pessimistic story? Mastery of new skills is a huge motivator for people, one that can really be harnessed through storytelling. Okay, so here's another one. The last thing that the research from Drive shows that really motivates us is purpose. And purpose is like finding a deeper or greater meaning. There's validation in that, right? This ability to connect, to be a part of a deeper story. I feel like this is one of the ways in which storytelling connects the easiest. Because the stories we tell about the work we do, it either draws people to that work or it pushes people away from it. So even in the work that I do, we at the Center for Ethical Leadership, We are all about trying to help people become the best possible leaders they can. We try and tell the story of how we are here for every student on campus. We also help with faculty and staff, and that our goal is to offer meaningful leadership development for every single student, because we know that so much rises and falls in leadership. So if we are able to come alongside the subject matter expertise that you're getting in your majors, and if we're able to teach you then how to be leaders in those fields, so that as the College of Education trains you to be an incredible elementary school teacher, that maybe we can then give you skills so that you can be a leader in that field to really shape the way that other teachers make them better in their craft as well. That's part of what we get to do, to offer those skills so that you can become not just subject matter experts, but really be leaders in your field. So if that's the story we're telling, hopefully that connects to a deeper purpose for you. That there is some reason why you need to be a better leader, because there are going to be people who are counting on you. The other people's success and failure sometimes does depend on the decisions you make as a leader, or the culture that you create as a leader. So by telling even that story, and that's what we mean by story, by telling that story of how important this is for all of us to connect to become better, we can become motivated through connection to that deeper purpose. So it opens up these avenues where instead of just offering some type of reward or punishment, that there really is a deeper purpose that we can connect to, and that's why we're going to be motivated. So those intrinsic motivations happen as we connect to that deeper story told by those who are the leaders. And so the big question here then is, what's the story that you're telling? When it's in your own relationships, whether it is in your study groups or in your labs, whether it's with the jobs that you have and the families that you lead, what is the story that you're telling there? Now, we haven't talked much about punishments, but that's another way that we often look at trying to motivate people. So whether it's in a job of getting written up and fired, or whether it's in a class, our entire educational system, by the way, works off of motivation through grades or punishments through grades. And so um, those are the things where we start to look at or challenge the system. For those of you who've taken one of my leadership classes where we talk about this, but you start to challenge the process of, okay, is that really the best way? Is the best way to motivate someone through a reward or a punishment? Or is there another way that we could really look at motivating those? And so when we're looking at these other motivations, we are looking at autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And we believe that the ways that you can connect to those or start to tap into some of that is through these storytelling skills or competencies. Taylor, I believe that you have some type of code word for people before we jump into kind of our last thoughts.
Yes, so the code word for those who are going to be watching this virtually is going to be taco. And so please email me the word taco to get credit for this if you are not watching at the time of the seminar.
So for all of you live, you can just think about the taco and how good that would taste in a few minutes. So, okay. Now, I really would like to open this up for some questions, ways in which we can start to apply these skills of how we can motivate ourselves and others. So you can either unmute and ask us, you can type those in the chat. Again, Taylor, since I'm sharing screen, I really can't see the chats very effectively, so I'll rely on you there. But please, any questions that you have about how we can apply these skills?
Yes, to reiterate, the code word is taco. Now, you only need to email me this if you're going to be watching this on the recording on our website later on. So, if you're on this call currently, you don't need to email me. And the second question is, what is the strategy of leadership?
Yeah. So when you're leading, let's say that you are, let's say that you're working, like you're leading a work team, and that team of people has a task that has to get done. Like say maybe you have to plan some type of event for the university. Um, the strategy here for leadership is how are you going to motivate? Well, I guess the question is how are you going to motivate yourself and your team to really do a great job? Well, the strategy that we're saying is that storytelling is one of those motivating factors. And the way that you can tap into the best way to motivate would be through telling stories that really connect to autonomy, to freedom, of mastery of a new skill, and then finally of a greater purpose. So maybe it is that you are wanting to motivate your team to really buy into this new event. So you're going to say, hey, there's a greater purpose that's here. Like we believe that by holding this event, that this is really going to be something that helps students. The students who were struggling before, maybe it's a mental health event, right? So students who were struggling before, now through what we are doing, these will be students that can access resources and really through our event be helped in a big way. So that's the story that you're going to tell that helps to motivate. Kaylin, is that a hand up and you have a question there? Oh, I'm sorry, Kaylin, you're still muted. No worries.
Hey, sorry, I've had some
No
internet
worries.
connection issues. So if motivation is like self-radiating, so from your inside, you need to prioritize your own motivation, so it's good for your autonomy, right?
Absolutely. You can't be passionate about everything, can we? So I think it's important for us to prioritize. And Kaylin, I think this is what you were getting at. Yeah, I think you have to really prioritize what's most important to you, where you're going to focus as a leader. It doesn't mean that we can't do multiple things simultaneously. In fact, I would say almost all good leaders are multitasking in their passion. But I think it definitely means uh, that we have to have some good self-care habits as well, have some good boundaries. When you're talking about autonomy, yeah, it's important that we have freedom, freedom to really choose those things that we're most passionate about and where we want to focus.
Another question is, what are some strong points that should be made throughout the story? As in, what are some things that should be mentioned to help motivate without just the story itself?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Um, I honestly, that's where I would call us back to. The story needs to have some tie-in to autonomy, to purpose, to sorry, autonomy to mastery to purpose. So again, like I go back to a work. Well, I was going to go back to an example of like a workplace, but let's go ahead with students. So let's say that you're in a study group with a group of people, obviously because it's a group. So you're in your study group. You're trying to motivate each other and yourself to study hard for an exam that's coming up. It would be much, much easier to push that off to a later time. So then you have to find some motivation in the story. And again, it can be a very, very short thing that we're doing here, but you have to find some motivation to say, no, we need to go ahead and study. So the story that you would tell is something like, hey, just think how good it's going to feel whenever we've mastered this topic. I think how great all of us, how it's going to be whenever we've put in the time, we've really learned this new skill, and now we're ready for the exam. So that would be one story that you could tell in that sense, where you're really tapping into mastery. Or it's like someone else said, hey, let's get it done now so that we can have some free time later. And that's always a good thing so that we're not staying up as late doing homework. So I also think about this one. I'm sorry, does someone have a question there?
Yes. Well, not question, just like my insight was that it's also not only the story that you tell others, but the story that you tell yourself, like to change your storytelling and to be more compassionate and to really tell you a very inspiring story to yourself in order to motivate you in the day to day, you know. So that was really powerful to me in this workshop.
Haley, thank you so much. I really appreciate that comment, and it is 100% true. I would even argue that the stories we tell ourselves um, probably have a greater impact because we live out. Like it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you end up living out the stories that you tell yourself. And so if the story that's running through your head all day is I'm not good enough and I can't do it, well, that's what you end up living out. And yes, I believe that we need to be so gracious and compassionate to ourselves. Um, it's good to be self-aware of your mistakes, but I also, and I was asked this question recently by a student, actually a student who's on this call, but I was asked by a student, how do you address those questions like um, uh, what's your biggest weakness? I think really reframing that to this idea of a growth mindset of it's not that I'm bad at things, it's that I'm still growing in certain areas. And so having that type of story is very transformative. And so Haley, yeah, I really appreciate you making that comment. The stories we tell ourselves sometimes are lies too. We start to believe the lie, and so then you start to tell that story. And so we need to make sure that the stories are rooted or grounded in truth, and that they are very kind to ourselves. One day, I hope that we will be, that you'll become the type of person that you've always dreamed of becoming. But that only happens if you tell good stories internally. Any other thoughts, questions? Oh, I think Jacob asked a question in the chat. Is that right?
Yes, he said, how often are incentives within an organization contradictory? How these incentives can be aligned to achieve a common goal?
Jacob, great question. I think it depends. It depends on the organization and how much they've thought through incentive programs. And remember, I do think there are times for rewards and punishments. I absolutely believe that the research shows that they are effective. It's just whenever you get into the more cognitively complex tasks, sometimes those rewards and punishments actually become a hindrance. And so, and I've noticed this with my sons, right? So they're getting older. And before, whenever a reward or a punishment was an effective tool to motivating them, now maybe it's not as much because we're dealing with cognitively far more complex tasks. It's not as simple as make your bed or don't make your bed, and I have to motivate you for that. Now we're talking about issues of global hunger, and that's a little bit more complex than making your bed in the morning. And so I think with those tasks, to motivate them to really dig into those topics or to have passion for it, it's not about a reward or a punishment. In organizations, I think these are things that I would be looking for whenever, Jacob, I know that you're an undergrad, so at some point soon, you're going to be looking for jobs. And I think that those are the organizations that you really look for is the ones that have thought through those type of like alignment for motivation, that there are rewards and bonuses and things for tasks that that help the company, but that aren't maybe as cognitively complex, and their intrinsic motivations for some of those tasks that are a little bit cognitively complex. Google's a really good example of this. They have something that's called 20 time. And in Google 20 time, basically, full-time employees, and I'm not sure if it's all of it or just their programmers, but they get 20% of their time to work on whatever task they want to work on. This is that autonomy motivator, right? And so, basically, 8 hours out of your 40-hour work week, Google 20 time employees they're working on whatever they are interested in. Google actually points to a large number of their big advancements happening based on 20 time projects. So those type of organizations are fun to work for because that motivation can happen intrinsically. But Jacob, I think the answer to your question is that it really depends on the organization. Some have thought through these a lot more than others. Taylor, do we have anything else in the chat?
I don't see anything else.
Okay. Everyone, we really appreciate your time. We are so grateful for all the work that you do in leading your world. Like we said, however big or small that world is, we hope that you will be life-giving leaders, that the spaces around you will be better because you are there. If you ever have any questions, the Center for Ethical Leadership is here to help you. Taylor, we do have 2 more seminars coming up. Is that correct?
Yes, we have 2 more. The next one is March 2nd, and then the next one after that is April 6th. And both of those can be registered on our website.
Okay, and our website is just, if you Google Center for Ethical Leadership in Oklahoma State, you'll find us. And this has been the Leadership Development Series. We hope you have a very wonderful Taco Tuesday, but on a Monday. Thank you guys so much, and take care.